Welcome to Sketchbook Legends. I'm your artist, Paul Hostetler. Today we're drawing the first Swedish superhero, Pippi Delicatessa Windowshade Macromint Ephraim's daughter Longstocking. That's right, Pippi Longstocking. Out of the boat, let's say Pippi's name is the English translation from the original Swedish. Unlike Tove Jansson's Moomins, which can be phonetically pronounced pretty much the same in Finnish and English, Pippi's name is made up of a bunch of actual nouns, like window shade and mackerel mint. In the original Swedish, she goes by, and apologies in advance, I'm going to mangle this. I do not have a Swedish accent, and I'm not going to do the Swedish chef from the Muppets. But in Swedish, she goes by Pippilotta Victualia Rolgardina Krosminta Ephraim's daughter Langstrump. And I guess Langstrump is the Swedish word for long stockings. The original artist for Pippi, Ingrid van Nyman, portrayed Pippi as short, kind of a stumpy little girl. I think the illustrations are reminiscent of Linda Berry's style. If you happen to find a original Swedish copy of the first printing of Pippi Longstocking, you can see what I'm talking about. I found them on Google. The copies that I first read, the version that I first read of Pippi Longstocking had pen and ink illustrations by Louis Glanzman, who I'm pulling more from in regards to my illustration. The way he draws Pippi is the way I think of Pippi. Glanzman gave her like a lanky figure, a wide mouth, and sort of a pug's nose. Everyone draws Pippi with a whole mess of freckles, and it's iconic for her to have the pigtails that stick out to the sides. You can see in my drawing what I'm doing is I'm drawing Pippi in what's kind of an iconic pose where she's lifting her poor sad old horse over her head, Pippi being the world's strongest girl. And as we know from Cyndi Lauper, girls just want to have fun. And Pippi's idea of fun is to show off by carrying around her horse. I think the reasoning behind that is that the horse carries her all over the place. Why shouldn't she carry the horse sometimes too? Pippi Longstocking was created by native Swede Astrid Lindgren at the request of her daughter Karen. Karen was homesick one day, I think, with a broken leg, the Wikipedia article said, and said, "Tell me a story about," and then she just made up a name, Pippi Longstocking. Lindgren thought to herself, this is an extremely interesting, bizarre, silly name. I've got to come up with an extremely bizarre, interesting character to go along with it. And she made it up pretty much on the spot. She has creating a character who's kind of a rascal. Pippi lives alone in sort of a broken down mansion that she calls Villa Villaculla. She's got neighbors next door, 2 kids, Tommy and Annika Settergren, who are sort of the point of view characters. Like, what would you do if a girl this crazy moved in next door? Pippi lives alone with her horse and her monkey, pet monkey named Mr. Nilsson. And yeah, she lives alone with her horse and her monkey, and she has a giant suitcase full of gold coins given to her by her father to take care of expenses. Her father, I'm going to go on a side note, Ephraim Longstocking, is interesting in his own right because he doesn't exist. He doesn't show up for the first 2 books in the 3-book Pippi Longstocking series because he is supposed to be a pirate who was lost at sea. And I think it's incredibly interesting that he was actually based on a real historical figure. In 1904, on Christmas Day, the trade ship Herzog Johann Albrecht sank off the coast of Tabar Island, which is a very small island about 350 miles west of Papua New Guinea, which itself is a little to the north of Australia. The lone survivor of the boat was a Swedish sailor named Carl Emil Peterson, who was rescued by the natives. The natives of Tabar Island were rumored to be cannibals, but they didn't eat him. They just took him to the king of the island, and the Tabar royal family took a liking to him. And 3 years later, he married the Princess Singdo and had 9 children. And when the present king died, he eventually became the king of Tabar afterwards. From what I can tell, he was a relatively good king, as kings go. He was respectful. Peterson was respectful of local customs and the welfare of his people and his employees. He started a coconut plantation to, facilitate trade with other islands and colonies in the area. Eventually expanded to 2 other islands. He found a gold deposit on one of these islands and tried to curate that so that it wouldn't collapse the local economy or anything. As far as I can tell, Peterson only left the islands twice. Once, after Queen Singdo died, he returned to Sweden to find a new wife to take care of these 9 kids that he had. She didn't agree with the climate and got sick, and then he got sick, and in 1935 he went to Australia for medical care, and he didn't ever recover enough to return. At the time, early 20th century, the story of Peterson was extremely popular in Sweden. They made up a whole bunch of stuff about him that wasn't necessarily true about how he punched out sharks and such. But it is true that the Tabar Island natives gave him the nickname Strong Charlie. I guess because he was so healthy and willing to engage in physical labor. And the whole thing sort of sounds like a pulp adventure tale, but with, happy endings pretty much all the way around. And Astrid Lindgren would have known about Peterson, and she used his story as the basis for the origin story of Ephraim Longstocking, and the fact that he was called Strong Charlie was probably an influence on her decision to give Pippi and her father both super strength. Other influences that went into the creation of Pippi Longstocking included romantic redhead Anne Shirley from the Anne of Green Gables series, the powerful altruist alien Superman, parentless imp Peter Pan, and also whatever the opposite of World War II was. Lindgren had to live through World War II in Sweden, and she considered the whole thing misanthropic, emotionally stunted age. That's a direct quote. And she wanted a character who was the opposite of that. Pippi is generous. Pippi has a sense of humor. And in making Pippi the strongest girl in the world, she wanted a character who had immense power but never abused it, which is, pretty much the opposite of what World War II was all about. Plot-wise, the super strength also comes in handy in putting Pippi on even ground with any of the adult opponents she encounters. They might have money or authority or respectability. In some cases, they might even have, guns. But Pippi can lift them over her head and throw them out a window. Both strength and political and lethal power are considered forms of authority. All of a sudden, the odds are equaled. And I think it's a clever way, and a good way of showing that, children, a lot of the time, aren't treated equally. I mean, in the real world, they can't be treated equally just because they have so much less experience and less, a less controllable brain. But every child that I've known, including myself, is very, very aware that it's not entirely fair that adults get to tell them what to do. And we all have the sneaking suspicion that left on our own, we would have been pretty much just fine, given, like super strength and a suitcase of gold coins. I mean, this sort of philosophy, of course, meant that, Jesus. This sort of philosophy meant that the stuffy prudes of the literary establishment were split on whether Pippi was good or bad. Those a little bit more in tune with what children actually like and enjoy reading thought Pippi was great. The prudish, offendable ones thought Pippi was a subversive, mentally disturbed, harmful to children, and a badly written book. Right out of the box, though, Pippi was a bestseller on multiple continents. The Wikipedia page of editions is longer than the screen. She's been translated into more languages than I can even remember existing. And on those accolades, I'm going to turn back to The Nameless Horse. There were some movies made of Pippi Longstocking in which the horse is named Old Man. Fine name for a horse. But in the books, the horse has no name. Pippi's horse has no name. She doesn't walk through the desert with him. But I'm not really sure what she calls him either, or if he's just horse. call this out just because, in general, artists consider horses to be very hard to draw. I've never thought about it that way, just because I find anatomy in itself kind of a challenge. And horses are mammals, so their basic anatomy is pretty much the same as a person's. When it comes to drawing, it's just a different size and shape, but all of the sort of structures are still there. They've got a big rib cage that you need to take into account, and long, skinny limbs, which is the way that I like to draw limbs anyway. You can see him making everything sort of knobbly and awkward, as an indication of like not only the age of old man, but also the fact that he's not, a thoroughbred racing horse, or he's sort of a mutt of a horse in the way that Pippi is kind of a mutt also, wearing her, stitched together clothes. None of the other artists that I've seen have given Pippi clothes quite as harlequin as the way I've drawn him. Maybe I was pulling a little bit from the other famous redhead, Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas, and just giving her a more patchwork appearance. But yeah, I consider horses to be sort of just awkwardly shaped people, and in that way, they become a little bit easier to draw. There are things, at least in my style, there are things that my style does not really, it's not really intended for. Horses are good. Cars and buildings, less so. Straight lines are right out. I like a knobbly organic shape. Now, there have been, as I mentioned, many adaptations of Pippi Longstocking. The first ones came out of Sweden. I think there were 2 movies and a TV show. For some reason, I've decided that an old man horse is got some palomino in him, giving him some spots. Probably to mirror the freckles on Pippi. There we go. Currently, there's also a theme park based on Lindgren's work. Pippi was not the only thing that she ever wrote. She enjoyed doing adventure novels, young adult novels about all sorts of characters. Pippi's just the best known over on our side of the Atlantic. But if you want, you can take your kids over to Lindgren World, and they can see Pippi's house and actors portraying her and a whole bunch of other characters that she came up with that you may not be familiar with, or at least that I'm not familiar with. In 1971, Hayao Miyazaki met with Lindgren about making a movie based on Pippi. It would have been his first movie, his first studio Ghibli movie too. Miyazaki had already done a number of storyboards and concept drawings for what he wanted his animated feature to look like. And he showed these to Lindgren and got a face-to-face meeting at her house in Sweden. And she said no. It's unsure why. But in any case, Miyazaki did a whole bunch of other movies about young, spunky girls off on their own, having adventures. And even if Pippi would have fit right in there, I don't think it was a huge loss, especially since the character design that he made up for Pippi got reused in another movie by one of his cohorts, a movie called Panda Go Panda. There's a little red-headed girl with giant stick-out pigtails. It's very easy to recognize as, Ghibli's take on Pippi Longstocking, minus the Pippi Longstocking. A little bit in the other direction, there's, what's his name? The girl with the dragon tattoo, that author guy. He based Lisbeth Salander, the main character of those, whom, if you remember, she's got black hair and a whole bunch of piercings and a dragon tattoo all over her back, and she dresses in black leather and heavy eyeshadow and drives a motorcycle and solves murder mysteries. She's based on Pippi Longstocking too. The idea was, what if Pippi grew up and got a bunch of tattoos and dyed her hair black? And also, it's a sordid series. In the original Swedish, it's titled not The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but it's called the Men Who Hate Women series. So I don't know. It doesn't really fit in with the Pippi aesthetic of, freedom and equality and power without abuse. But I suppose that's kind of that author's point, is that in the real world, those things are much harder to come by. But you don't want to necessarily cram those lessons into a children's book. I've added some China marker to the drawings, and to give them a shiny appearance, I'm throwing some more spot blacks onto Pippi's boots here. Every single other illustrator that I've looked at has given Pippi clogs. It's a Swedish thing, or I guess a Dutch thing, or just normal girls' shoes. Throwing a little homage to her piratical origins and giving her swashbuckling boots. And also, I just really like characters with huge floppy feet. If I have my druthers, every character that I draw is going to have huge floppy feet in fun boots with high heels. Now that we got a good look at the finished horse, one thing that I really wanted to put in was old man, or the way that horses sort of have prehensile lips. Bears can do this too, where they can sort of curl their lips away from their gums. So you can see a whole bunch of teeth. And since they don't have fingers, it helps them grab onto foods, but it gives them remarkably expressive faces, considering how much of the rest of it they can't move. And just to avoid any pictorial awkwardness, I've cast the entire crotchular region of Old Man Horse in sort of a uniform gray shade, just to avoid any massive swinging horse dong in the picture of the beloved children's classic character. And that's Pippi Longstocking. If you enjoyed this video and me talking over it, you can press the like button. If you really, really, really liked this video and me talking over it, you can press the subscribe button, because I'll be making more of them, exactly like this one. I've got a Patreon, a Ko-Fi, and a Blue Sky, all at P.Hostetler.art. And, if you want to check me out on my permanent web page, that's at phostetler.com. Until next time, stay sketching, stay legendary, have a nice day.